Thanks for having me, guys. This is going to be a pretty casual conversation today. I'm going to spend about 20 minutes or so giving a little presentation, and then really want to open it up and answer questions that you guys might have. So just give a little introduction of myself. My name is Jonathon Hensley. I'm the CEO of Emerge Interactive. I started the company a little bit over 20 years ago in San Francisco. Grew up in the heartland of Silicon Valley in Palo Alto, and started off the company as a digital think tank where we helped companies with early strategy who wanted to come into the digital space. From there, my career took me to New York, where I ended up helping NBC build one of their digital teams and working with some production studios in Los Angeles to help them drive some of their early product innovation. And then decided to come back to the West Coast and move up here close to family and friends. So to give you a little bit of more insight into Emerge, Emerge is a full-service digital product agency. What that means is we specifically focus on helping clients from small business to Fortune 500 companies develop digital products and services, or if they have existing products or services that are web, mobile, or IoT based, we're helping them improve those. So that might be anything from internal business applications to some of your applications you may download on your phone and use day to day. Most of our stuff is focused on the B2B space. We don't do a lot of consumer goods, gaming type of things, but are really focused on that core. A few examples of some of our clients, mostly in the high-tech and high-end consumer goods space, ranging from Home Depot, Nike, who we all know in our neck of our woods here, kind of across the board. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for 20 years. We've got a team, a little over 20 people here in Portland, and work with our clients all over the world. We're pretty proud of the fact that our clients keep coming back to us. So, when we say we build long-term relationships with our clients, we really mean it. Most of our clients have been doing work with us 2 or more years. We have a 93% retention rate, so our teams get to work on these initiatives for long-term engagements, which is a lot of fun, especially when you want to see some of these bigger ideas come to life over time. So let's take a step back here, way back. I want to talk a little bit about what I think specifically a developer, an engineer, a maker is. And I think it's really important to have a little bit of historical context when we think about what's coming forward. And we get into a little bit more detail of some of the things that we look for in engineers and developers, especially what we see our clients as we help them build their product teams of engineers and designers, what they're looking for as well. So not to get into kind of the historics of, the wheel, but more into what I think makers are doing constantly. And there's some threads to all of this. So one of the big things, right, makers, we innovate tools that we have. And so innovation of the wheel was a transformational step in human history. Eventually that led to the makers of the world being able to innovate and develop things like the modern car, which now looks like this today. So huge evolution based on a very simple concept. And that comes from the engineers and the makers of their time. And I think that's incredibly important to realize that as developers, you're the engineers, you're the makers of our time. And this same trajectory is what's taking place. We're building on top of the technology that precedes us to build the technologies of the future. Same thing with the printed press. We'll look back to what the print started as, moved into things like Wikipedia, launching in 2001, and Amazon releasing the e-reader in 2007. Again, that same evolution of what it is to be that engineer and that maker in the time. We see it again with things like the personal computer as we defined it, in 1985, groundbreaking technology and innovation, and it's in that era. And what we consider personal computing today is completely changed. So this is really important perspective for a couple of different reasons. One, we're always obsessed with the big ideas, and I love a great idea. I think we all do. we idolize their champions, right? We love them. But at the end of the day, idolize the makers. I'm more interested in the people behind the scenes who didn't have the idea but had the tenacity and the skills and the capabilities to actually make those things real. And I think that's a really important shift in how we look at some of the things that are happening in the industry right now. So let me give some examples. So, looking at where we are today with the internet and digital products and services, we started off, roughly in the 90s and late 80s with what we'd consider Internet 1.0 before it was publicized. That was really the plumbing, right? It's the wiring and the backbone of what we see today. Then we moved into Internet 2.0, which was really starting to see new businesses emerge on top of this technology. So things like Google, Facebook, and the like, Expedia, all these new services, which were digital native organizations. And now we're in an era of digital 3.0, which is really the ubiquity of the internet and connectivity, forcing all businesses to think about digital and technology and how we develop and engineer to use this in our daily lives. And that is really fundamentally changing what we need to look for. That's also led to a really interesting opportunity and challenge. So from a market context, we're still just crossing the chasm as far as early adoption in internet, mobile, and IoT-based technologies, and especially with what that means for even earlier stage things that are happening around machine learning and AI. Why is that a big deal? Well, the fundamental truth is that as we've seen this scale up in the marketplace, if you're developing these skills, if you're looking to get jobs in the marketplace, there's more companies than ever asking and demanding those services. The challenge, though, is there's a lack of leadership and experience to actually facilitate effectively delivering on that promise of technology. And we see that by reports like Harvard, where 84% of digital initiatives fail. And that's a staggering rate. And so it's not about just understanding the opportunity that you have, but it's about leveraging and understanding what's happening in the marketplace, because that's going to put you in the best position to choose a career path that can be, fundamentally, you can make it whatever you want right now, I think, as a developer. And you don't have to just think about what you're creating as the maker, but actually the opportunity to lead as a maker and fill that leadership gap. And that's growing, and that's going to get bigger and bigger the more we see the market kind of move across this whole adoption curve. So, talk about leadership. Leadership comes down to a couple of fundamental things. It's not just understanding the technology, it's understanding the application of the technologies that you're implementing. It's really about making sure that there's clarity around understanding how the work that you're doing ties back to the business and the business case that's being developed, so that there's really continued investment into hand on the stove making mac and cheese for my 4-year-old. I'm disabled in that moment temporarily. And he wanted to look at how does this really impact how we focus creating quality applications and experiences. And he took this passion, this commitment, this strive for excellence, and he drove this through the entire organization and fundamentally transformed the way Emerge offers its services and sets its standards of quality and testing for all clients and applications as we went forward, because he opened our eyes to what that meant. So it was an incredible, it wasn't just his own mastery, it's the fact that because he was able to develop that mastery through that passion, he was able to actually influence the entire organization. And that's something we look for now in every engineer that comes and applies at Emerge. I think the next one is always being curious. So this goes, I think to that idea of, you have to always be looking and curious for the next thing that's happening in the technology. It's part of why I kind of like the historical reference of like we're building on top of these technologies that are enabling the next era of what we're doing. It's really important to stay at the forefront of that and not to lose sight of that. And so what we really look for is in developers, and especially a big part of our job is we're helping our clients build product and development teams and design teams that we're working in collaboration with, is that we're always looking for this curiosity, this innate ability where their passion for the technology is showing through. We can see that they're trying to push beyond the scope of their, maybe their focus, whether it be front end or back end server side technology or data infrastructure, whatever it is. We're looking for them to look beyond it and see what else, or understand the landscape and how that fits, and that's really important. I think a good example of that is we have a really phenomenal engineer that we've had an opportunity to work with in the Bay Area. His name's Emiliano. Fantastic guy. He, is not only a brilliant engineer, but he started to really think about how these technologies across his organization could be impacted. And so he started to go out on his own and started to do lunches and breakfasts and all these things with people far outside of his purview, but really was important because he started to build a knowledge of the entire organization, which helped him be a better engineer and to provide better solutions, creating incredible opportunity both for himself and for the company. And so I think it's also really good to stretch yourself and get outside of sometimes these kind of siloed teams, which are very, very common in development, and really break out and make sure you really embrace all the people around you, from sales, marketing, operations. Doesn't matter where they sit. They have an incredible perspective on the work that you're doing and how it creates value for everybody. I think the next one is a thirst for learning. So this is that continuous learning pushed even further. What's the next technology getting into mastery, right? If you see one set of technology sunsetting, are you actually starting to develop the next skill set to really move forward? We saw a lot of this happen industry-wide when we saw what was happening with the emergence of mobile technology years ago. You had a lot of front-end web engineers who are going, here's this thing mobile, what does that mean? Do I need to retool my skill sets? What's going to happen? We see a lot of engineers now tooling towards more things like machine learning and AI, are going much deeper into the abilities of their server-side technology. What can they do? How do they understand infrastructure development and more abstraction, things that are really going to help them excel as they move forward, especially if they're shifting anywhere from maybe a small business environment, especially to an enterprise environment. But just understanding the sophistication and the complexity that gets layered into the technology at that point. So I think that thirst for learning is something that we always look for. It's something that we actively are pursuing and finding developers and really thoughtful people who see that their skills today are just the cost of entry, and then it's continuing to grow that skill set again and again. That's going to keep them as a top team member across any team, whether they're client side, working for an agency, or a company like us that's focused on product. And I think last but not least, it's excellent communication. We really look at roles today. They like technology, they get it, but they don't understand how it's built, and they don't get what it takes. So it's literally living in a black box for them. And so being that communicator, being that bridge builder is essential. And so those are really the core competencies and the things that we look at beyond the skill sets, like I said, that we see as table stakes. So like I said, I promised it would be short and sweet. I think we're 15, 20 minutes. What I'd love to do is open it up to you guys. This last time, I know the majority of the time that was needed was really for Q&A. And I really wanted to support that because we had some pretty interesting conversations last time I came and presented. So with that, I'd love to open it up to you guys.
So an interesting comment about the technical skill set being necessary, but not really where the action was, the soft skills being more important. And it's really struck me that although most of the coding out there is really simple coding, thread operations, and most of the time you're not doing sophisticated algorithms. But so much of the hiring process still starts with the code test, which usually seems like it's a lot more sophisticated than the coding you actually end up doing in the real job, because most coding does important things, but it doesn't take rocket science to do that. And do you think that's misguided, or do you think that it's still a good idea to sort of set that prerequisite hurdle with the code challenge and then move on to talk about stuff?
I think that's a great question. I think it's actually a requirement. I mean, you have to prove that you have those hard skills before you can move in and really evaluate whether a person has the soft skills that you're looking for in that particular position. If you don't do that, I don't think you're really setting up the person who's interviewing for success, and you're really definitely not setting up the team that's hoping to get this great talent on board for success either. And you're right, there are a lot of challenges that kind of push the boundaries of some of in the code challenge of like how you think and what you do, and I think that's also really good. And then you end up doing a lot of development that is a little bit more basic in its core. I think the other thing that I've seen in that interview process across a dozen plus companies is that when they ask you to do those code tests and they push you to the boundaries, they're also looking how you handle stress in your development process. And so I know that working with large organizations are actually looking for stress testing as part of that code evaluation process. It's not just it's multi-purposed in many cases.
Gotcha.
Do you have a question? Oh, sorry, I left. Anybody else?
Probably one of the best interview questions that I always get, and I have a lot of respect for, is your last point. How do you stay current with changing technologies? And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, successful strategies that you've seen.
So we asked that question too, and I think one of the challenges is that we tend to get very generic answers. And I
So your background is
in technology and business. Yeah. Great.
So is Emerge primarily based here now? Started in the Bay Area and then you were in...
Yeah, we're 100% here in Portland, so been here for 15 years now.
Okay.
Just moving around different spots downtown. Currently we're on 12th and Stark, right across from, or right above Bamboo Sushi. Everybody knows where usually that is. So, great. You guys are making this really easy on me. No other questions?
What do you look for in a junior developer?
Good question.
If you hire junior developers in the first place?
We do. I mean, it's a mix. Basically, when we're looking and assessing, so we were talking, and there's two types of things that we look at. Skills, basic skills and capabilities, I mentioned, are kind of like table stakes, and then there's soft skills that we like to build off of. We're looking for still both of those in every level of the position that we're looking for. Soft skills can almost be more important for junior developers, in my opinion, because, around those listening, constant learner, because they are on a path as a junior developer. They're going to take, they're going to make more mistakes, they're going to need more support, and they need to be in an environment where they can thrive. And so to know that they have that constant learner mentality, to know that they're going to really be proactive in communication is really going to be essential to their success, because their peers are going to be very busy. And we want them to be proactive in, being a loud voice and not, kind of hiding behind the screen. So we really want to see them come forward and see that. So, when we're doing a skill assessment, the way that we do it, we do 360 interview processes. So every position gets somebody from every single department is actually involved. So you would go through like a phone screening. There will be some skill assessment that happens there from a technical lead. Then you would go through and have a 360 interview process if you met the qualifications. And then you would move through, and there would be some additional code tests further into the process. But all those skills of communication, follow-up, consistency, along with the actual coding skills, are being evaluated at every stage. We're about 24 people today.
So with the technical interview side of things, it seems like questions can be pretty far-ranging of what the interviewee is being asked. How do you weigh between the answer given versus the process to try and develop the answer?
Are you talking specifically like how do we guide the interview, or?
Just more of, it seems like it's just such a broad area that it can be hard to have the correct answer for everything, for every question.
Oh, sure.
What he's asking is the right answer more important than the thinking behind it?
Gotcha. Is that
Yeah.
okay? Just making sure.
Right.
Both are important. I mean, I can't say that one, but what we're looking for predominantly is problem-solving skills. And so the competency of like, how do you solve the problem? How did you break things down? How did you assess the pieces? Looking at how you needed to refactor a code or debug something, or what was your process? That's really essential. But it's because those are harder things to teach. Problem skills like that and that competency is a lot more difficult than saying, hey, let me show you this technology. I'm going to show you how the syntax works, and et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of easy stuff. And we don't penalize people for quote unquote the wrong answer if the thinking is really strong behind it, because we just know that maybe they haven't been exposed to it. And we understand too that interviews are really stressful times for anybody at any level. I don't know if he's still here. Is Nate still here? Okay. So Nate was here earlier. He's our director of business development, but he was also in recruiting for years and years and years. And so I was hoping he could add a little bit to that. But it's from we've seen that there too. Is it's we understand we can teach you how to get to the right answer, but we can't always teach you to be a really good critical thinker.
So how you experience in a specific technology stack that you're hiring for versus past performance in other technologies?
Depends how much history you have in the technology, how complex the work you've done. I mean, there's a lot of factors to it, right? So, if you're coming in and you're saying, I want to do enterprise, tech, but you have no enterprise tech background and you've been working in engineering in a small business, we have to really dig deeper. We're going to have to look at, a couple of things. We're going to have to say, okay, how complex was the engineering that you're doing? What was the associated tasks with that? What was the infrastructure around your work? What were the, we want to understand that whole spectrum there. And sometimes that can be to your advantage also. I want to paint the other side of that picture, which is in a smaller business, you might be like, well, I had to own everything because there wasn't any help. In an enterprise business, you can be, kind of put in like, you're in this seat, do this task, and it becomes very much kind of almost like a production mentality to code. So we have to kind of peel back the layers, and that's just making sure we're investing the time and getting to know people. And I think it's easy to say that certain things, kind of predetermine like where somebody, fits into a company. And I think that companies like Apple and Google are recognizing that there's a lot of falsity in that. They just dropped a requirement, for example, to have a college education for engineers. So, things like that, being able to understand like, oh, we need to invest into, just meeting great people who have critical thinking, who we can, and see where they fit in the organization versus having all these kind of barriers to entry is fine. Some of the best engineers I know have no technical background code school whatsoever, but they're brilliant because it clicks for them. And so I think it really comes down to just understanding what is that actual history makeup of, because the resume doesn't give you very much at all, right? If I see that you have 10 years of coding experience, I don't know what that means until we get to talk. So.
Seems like a large subject of your talk was evolving technology and staying current. Is there anything you have as far as recommendations on keeping up with the way things are changing in the digital and technical fields?
Well, truthfully, from the most technical perspective, I'm probably not the best person to answer that, because my CTO and our engineering leads would be the best people for that one. But I do think it's really important to understand, and this is why it might seem a little bit out of place, but why I think it's really important is understanding the market trends that are happening. So there's going to be things that are happening at the technology and at the community level, but there's a lot of things that are happening on a much more macro level, and I think having awareness of that, following what's going on, is really, really important. And so that's kind of why I paint that arc and that bigger picture, because I find that once you're able to develop a mastery in a language, you can typically apply that to other languages, and the ramp up between languages gets lower and lower over time as you get better and better at it. So, but you have to be willing to do that, and you have to be willing to look at the bigger picture and go, where do I need to apply these skills? Has anybody in here ever heard of a language called Cold Fusion? So I'm not surprised that nobody other it's like probably one in 100 actually know what it is. At one point, it was like 90+% of the entire Fortune 100 was running on Cold Fusion. It's a product that's owned by Adobe, and it's because it didn't have a strong community around it. It just has been divested out of entirely, and so you don't even hear about it anymore. So, but 7 or 8 years ago, you had people going, "I'm going to become a Cold Fusion engineer," and now that there's no opportunity out there. Oracle's struggling with their talent right now for the very same reasons. That black box enterprise approach is just not where a lot of people want to put their time and energy. And so it's an aging community that is causing some significant problems where probably at some point, personal opinion only, I think Oracle's going to have to reevaluate some of its business model. And that's why Facebook and Google and Apple are kicking their tail. So.
Yeah, that rings true. I mean, it's easy to learn stuff. The hard part is figuring out what to learn.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do, and I'm a big believer in some level of specialization. I know it's early on too. It's exactly what you should be doing. If you're going through a program, like the Tech Academy, you've got to get exposure to kind of all the pieces. You can pick what's the best fit. Otherwise, you're not getting the full benefit of the opportunity, right? But I think as you go further and further in your career, there is some level of specialization that's required. Because you only have so many hours in a day to build the mastery in the code base and the technologies. So we see that used to be a lot more focused on like specific language sets. We see most engineers are more interested in actually being more diverse and crossing over in multiple languages, also because they play together. So we see more specialization as an example today is in things like, am I really interested in the front end layer of an application or experience? Or am I really much more heavy in the application server side? Or am I much heavier in the data infrastructure side of the app development or product development? And so where we see is that's how specialization starts to take shape. And so you get to say, I'm building a toolbox instead of before it was like, I have this one tool. And I think when you think about it that way, you actually can have a lot more value in going into the workforce because you can say, yeah, I can work on this front end layer, and we know that that's made up of these things. So that's really, really helpful because that also gives you, I think, more value going into bigger teams as well, where you've got to collaborate across functions, and they need to know that you can understand that conversation. Any other questions? All good stuff, guys. Awesome.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you for having me.